1923, Keith Rocco, via Mark Festoso, approached me about building a diorama depicting Omaha Beach on D Day. It was Keith's desire to build an exhibit that would honor the sacrifices and courage of the men and women that fought on D Day. After a preliminary meeting at my house to look at the feasibility, we met at Keith's studio to look at a mock-up of the diorama he had in mind. It would be part of a larger exhibit, featuring Keith's artwork and replica uniforms on mannequins. I readily volunteered my time and materials for the project. The first step was accumulating the many models we would need. Most of these were printed on my 3D Formlabs printer. Next, I built the bases, used materials cut so they would be easy to transport in vehicles, such as my car or Keith's van. The lumber yard where I got the wood was close to the U.S. Army Museum at Fort Belvoir, so I stopped in for a look. Once I got home, I began to work. The dioramas are approximately 5.5 by 6 feet. I used 1/4-inch masonite and 1x2s to build the frame for the bases. On top of this, I applied layers of foam, which I then shaped to make the terrain. To create the waves, I used paper mache made from toilet paper. To color the water, I painted it with Payne's gray and dark navy blue, covered with gloss. We had several joint work sessions where friends came to help paint figures and do work on the diorama. Meanwhile, there were a lot of details that had to be made for the diorama. I used my laser, foam cutters, and other tools to make many of these parts. To help expedite the construction, Keith stayed with us for a couple days and worked on the diorama. Here you can see how he's painting the surf to make it look more realistic. There were numerous models that had to be painted and have custom decals applied. Jeff Hammer came by a couple nights to help install details. And Mike and Linda Pierce, while visiting from the Shenandoah, also chipped in. After several weeks of work, the first diorama was done. We loaded it into a custom base that Keith had a carpenter build, and we took it to the Army-Navy Club for exhibit. With the first diorama done, I began work on the second one. The first diorama was the Colville sector. This one is the opposite end of Omaha Beach, the Vieirville sector. Vieirville features large cliffs that Rangers had to scale during the battle. I carved these out of rocks made from Durham's water putty. One of the best parts of the project was having friends come over to help work on it. Keith also stayed with us for another 2 days to help with the final details. The landing craft used at Vieirville were different than the ones used at Colville, and these required more 3D prints using different files. Probably the most complicated model in the overall project was the LCT used to transport tanks to the Vieirville sector. I scratch built this model using my laser cutter and various other parts over a course of 3 days. At last, the second diorama was completed. We loaded it into Keith's van so he could take it back to his house. On June 2nd, workers from the American World War II Experience Museum in Gettysburg arrived at Keith's house to bring the exhibit to their museum. Then, Keith and several volunteers helped set up the exhibit. It included artwork by Keith, mannequins dressed in World War II uniforms, the 2 dioramas, plus 2 other dioramas, one built by myself and one built by Mark Franke. Mark Festoso created some videos that can be accessed using QR codes on the exhibit, and Keith's friend made an overall introductory video, so it became a multimedia exhibit. Keith plans to have the exhibit travel to other museums until eventually finding a permanent home. The schedule of those other exhibits has not been fully determined. This was a very rewarding project to work on. I'm glad we had the opportunity to help commemorate this significant event in American and world history. Thanks for everyone that helped.